Today we're talking about the fall of the Roman Empire. We date the fall of the Roman Empire to the year 476 AD. And the reason we do this is because a German chieftain by the name of Odovacer, or Odovacar, depending on pronunciation, overthrew the Roman emperor Romulus Augustulus. This in itself, the idea of a German attacking Rome, was not unheard of. It had happened previously in the year 411, and the Huns had almost done it a few years previous to 476. What was unusual was that Odovacer overthrew the Roman emperor, but then did not make himself the Roman emperor. He instead chose to swear loyalty to the emperor of the Eastern Roman Emperor, the emperor located in what was known as Constantinople. So from that point on, there was no more Western Roman Emperor. So what we're going to talk about today is what conditions led to a relatively minor German chieftain overthrowing what was at one point the largest and most powerful political unit in Europe, the Roman Empire. So there are two major categories of reasons for why Rome fell when it did. But the most important thing to get out of the way is that these are very long-term causes. History very infrequently, not often, very infrequently has overnight disasters. Usually disasters are coming for a very long time. And the fall of the Roman Empire is a case example of this, where we can date back the major problems of the Roman Empire to almost 200 or 300 years before the thing actually comes crashing down. Okay. The height of the Roman Empire is probably in the late 2nd century. So the late 180s, 170s, that's the Pax Romana. That is the Roman peace. That's the time in which Roman legions guarded the empire's frontiers. Roman citizens were wealthy and relatively prosperous. There was a sense of pride in the Roman Empire. There was a series of good emperors in the Roman Empire that maintained that stability. But after the 2nd century, it begins to go downhill. What we see are emperors who are not as good at public policy, who are not as strong in defending the empire, who choose to spend the empire's money on things they shouldn't be spending it on, luxury goods, overspending on social programs that they can't afford, inept and incompetent taxation policies. All of these things are going to further diminish the power of the empire. So we're going to talk about two categories of causes, and the first one we're going to talk about right now is the economic problems of the empire. So after this Pax Romana, around the 2nd century AD, the taxation becomes a major issue. Taxes are way too high. However, the empire is also spending way too much. So they're spending too much money, more money than they're bringing in taxes. So the economy is always off balance. They're spending money on the military, on the legions, on the defense of the borders. For a long time, Rome had constantly been expanding. This map shows you the empire at its height, at the biggest point in which it reached. You can see it was from the Atlantic Ocean, Spain, southern Britannia, all the way to what is today the Middle East, and it was a huge, huge empire. Now we have to keep in mind that that expansion stopped, and much of the empire's economic growth was based upon expansion. They took over new territories. They would loot the new territories. They make money from new territories. They bring new people in who served in the workforce, who served in the army. And when the expansion stopped, they suddenly only had the people within the empire at that moment to tax and to use for work. And so that caused an economic problem. When taxes weren't coming in fast enough to pay for things, there was not enough gold coming in. Gold was leaving the empire to pay for luxury goods in the East. So inflation, Okay, this word inflation. Inflation means that the price of goods goes up, and that can be a problem when you're dealing with people who are spending their money on things. If prices are constantly going up and their money supply is not going up, that is a big economic problem. And so the main economic problems, I'll list them right here: overtaxation, inflation, and wealth inequality. The poor being very, very poor and the wealthy being incredibly wealthy. This divide served to create major problems for the empire. The second set of problems, what we call the barbarian invasions. So along the frontier meaning the border between the Romans and what were Germanic tribes of people who spoke Germanic languages. For a long time, the Romans and the Germans had a successful relationship. They traded back and forth. There was some flow of information and goods back and forth. But beginning in the 4th century, the Huns, a nomadic group of people from Central Asia, began pushing west towards Europe. And they attacked both the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. And when they pushed west, they pushed all the people ahead of them west as well. And so the German tribes who were on the border with the Romans wanted to get into the empire. They wanted to cross that border for protection. So we say that they invaded, but in reality they immigrated. They moved into the empire not to destroy it, but to live within the borders of it for protection and for wealth. The best modern example of this would be Mexican immigration to the United States. Mexican immigrants and Latin American immigrants come to America not to destroy the United States, but to take part in a wealthier country, a more successful experience. They're trying to provide a better, safer social life for their families. And so we have to keep in mind that the Germans who came into the Roman Empire in the 3rd century, they were looking for safety, looking for prosperity. And so what happens is that the Romans make a deal with some of these Germans, and they say that some of them can stay if some of the men continue to serve in the Roman army. So some of these Germans will volunteer for service in the Roman army. These tribes of Germans can come across. And it's a good deal for everyone. In many cases, the Romans promised land to these German tribes, specifically the Goths. And there begins to be some tension between what the Romans promise and what the Germans actually get, to the point where some of these German tribes, once they're inside the empire, consider themselves citizens of the empire, begin to rebel against Roman authority, not to overthrow the Roman Empire, but because they want to take part in the wealth of the empire. And so there's an example in the late 4th century when the Goths feel like they haven't been given what they've been promised by the Roman emperor, and they rebel, and an imperial army goes to attack them, and the Goths defeat the Romans at the Battle of Adrianople in 379, and they actually kill the Roman emperor who's at the battle, an emperor named Valens. And this sends shockwaves through the empire, that they're allowing in people who are fighting against the empire. And so there is a conflict between how the Germans who are coming into the Roman Empire see this problem and how the Romans themselves see these new additions to the Roman Empire. As these people begin to come in and serve in the Roman army begins to decline. Not because the Germans are bad fighters, but because they don't have as much loyalty to the Roman emperor, to the Roman state, as others might. They might have more loyalty to their immediate family or clan or tribe. And so the quality of the Roman army declines. Now, it doesn't go down too horribly. I mean, only 2 decades before Rome collapses, the Romans are able to defeat a Hun army in what is today France in a major battle. So it's not all downhill. The fall of Rome is in many ways a series of peaks and valleys where there are some Roman successes and a lot of Roman failures. And so it's not a straight line. It's a bunch of events that in the long term all show a decline, but there are ups and downs as they go along. And so when the Huns, a much larger tribe of nomadic peoples, do invade Europe right after the Germans, to the point where they're invading Italy, where the center of Western Roman power is, the Roman armies can't do much of anything. And so it has to be the Pope who goes out to negotiate with Attila the Hun. And so this is just another sign that the Roman Emperor is losing power. The Roman armies are no longer what they used to be. And so different groups begin breaking away from central Roman authority. So there becomes a kingdom of the Vandals in what is today North Africa and Spain. And there is a kingdom of the Lombards in what is today, they'll take over what is today parts of Italy. The Gauls, the Franks, the Saxons, Britannia will break away. And so throughout the 5th century, parts of the Roman Empire are beginning to break off from the central part because the Roman emperors can't hold it all together. Until finally, a Germanic chieftain that we mentioned before, Odovacer, will take over and depose and overthrow the final Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, in 476. So this 2-century decline of the Roman Empire is 2 centuries long. So it's not taking place overnight. And so we want to make sure, above all else, the fall of the Roman Empire is not immediate. It takes place over a very long time. And if you had asked someone the day after Odovacer overthrows Romulus Augustulus in 476, what happened, what's going on, they wouldn't have really thought of it as a big deal. We only know it's a big deal looking back on it. And so we want to make sure, as people studying this period, that we know that to the people living in that time, it wasn't as big a deal as we're making it out to be. It's only looking back that we realize it is. So the immediate consequence of this is that life kind of goes on for most people at the time. Rome had been in decline for a long time. They're pretty used to Germanic tribes taking places over. They just adjust to the new rules. So they used to have a Roman emperor to listen to. Now they listen to the king of the Franks, or the king of the Lombards, or the king of the Vandals. And so life goes on. Latin is still being spoken. Christianity, the religion of the late Roman Empire, is still very powerful, and it will remain powerful throughout the Middle Ages. Christianity is a factor of continuity. Continuity meaning something that stays the same over a long period of time. And so historians will argue and debate over whether we should call it the fall of the Roman Empire. Did Rome fall, or did it simply transform into something new? And so this is a question of historical debate. And so that'll be something that we look at as we move into the early Middle Ages.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?